Welcome back to Kaori's Corner. Remember, it's all suggested by you, reviewed by me, and today we are still doing that challenge that I was challenged to back on TikTok, where I'm supposed to watch every movie that's in my house, and this includes VHS tapes because I now have a VCR. And so because this includes VHS tapes, today we are doing a review of Pinocchio from 1940. And let me tell you, I have some things to say about the little wooden boy. So the first thing I'm going to say is that every single person in this movie, except for Figaro and Pinocchio himself, is a villain in some fucking way. So we start with Jiminy Cricket going to Geppetto's house during, I don't think it was raining, but it was cold. And he goes into this man's house, and this, he is a carpenter. He has all of this work everywhere. He's working on Pinocchio. He puts the last things on Pinocchio, has Pinocchio dancing around and things like that. Now, what makes Geppetto a villain here? I'm not going to say he's necessarily a villain, but he is a psychopath at this point, because you have every single clock, every single one set to 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock comes, and every single clock in your house and workshop goes off simultaneously. And you had the audacity and the nerve to go,
I wonder what time it is.
What do you mean? I would hate to be your neighbor. Then you are torturing Figaro, the cat. One, you scared the shit out of him with this creepy ass fucking puppet. And then you wouldn't allow him to go to sleep without giving a kiss to your goldfish. And then he's tucked into his bed, ready to go to sleep, and you talking about Figaro, I forgot to open the window. Get your ass up and open that goddamn window yourself. When did the cat become your slave? Justice for Figaro at this point, because then when Pinocchio goes missing later and you go out to look for him and you've cooked this magnificent feast and he's got this roasted fish with all of the fixings on it, and you tell him he can't eat it until you come back home, then you uproot him to go find Pinocchio later on and get him swallowed by a whale. Please, continuing on. So while everybody is asleep, the blue fairy's manipulative villainous ass comes down from the stars and brings Pinocchio to life to fulfill the wish of Geppetto. Now, why do I say she's a villain? Let me tell you. The manipulation starts here. She brings this boy to life, and he's very excited to be alive. And she's like, well, you're not really alive. You're not really real. You're just halfway alive because you're a puppet. But if you are a good boy, I can turn you real. How does he do that? Does she tell him? No. She just convinces us this little promising thing that if you do this thing that I'm not going to explain to you, then you're going to be a real boy someday. Then here comes Jiminy Cricket not minding his own business, talking about when you're trying to discern between right and wrong, you have to listen to your conscience. And because the blue fairy says something about a conscience, and here comes him because he was eavesdropping on the conversation, and it's a conscience tells you what's right and wrong. And instead of asking, what does that mean, we're all just apparently on the same page, even though it's very clear that Pinocchio, who literally just came to life and is acting like Frosty the Snowman at this point, has no idea what right and wrong is. Do either of them explain it to him? No. Now, Jiminy only said you have to listen to your conscience. He didn't volunteer himself or none of that. And here comes the blue fairy with her big ass eyes talking about do you want to be his conscience? Did I say I wanted to be his conscience? No. But because I think you're cute and you're sitting here like you're a fairy and type shit and you promised me a gold badge, I guess I'll go ahead and be his conscience. Does he do well as his conscience? No. Now we go into the next day. The next day, Geppetto sends his wooden child that just came to life less than 12 hours ago off to school. Now, listen, he was super excited that, you know, he came to life and things like that. And immediately, no plan of life whatsoever, you're going to send this boy to school. You're not going to tell him you can't do this and you need to come straight home. Like, you're not going to tell him any of those things. You're not going to tell him about the world. You're just going to have him get up the next morning and go to school. Did you even give him directions to the school? Do you think he knows how to get there? What is happening? So he takes an apple, gives it to Pinocchio to give to his teacher, and sends Pinocchio off to school with no directions. And Pinocchio is going off to school, and we run into Honest John and the cat whose name escapes me. And they're like, a wooden boy. Like, oh shit. So he's trying to catch him to get him over to Stromboli, who has this marionette show. And where is Jiminy Cricket? Oversleeping. You're fucking up already, sir. So when Jiminy finally does catch up to Pinocchio and Honest John and what's his face, Pinocchio has already like been convinced that he should be like a theater star. And that just means that he doesn't really have a thought process. He doesn't necessarily have a brain at this point. And whatever you tell him initially that is explained to him is the direction he's going to go. So by the time Jiminy Cricket catches up to Pinocchio, it has already been explained to him in simple terms that if you come with us and we take you to Stromboli and you become part of his show, you are going to become a star and you are going to make lots of money and you are going to be famous and popular. And like, he's taken all of these steps and he's put them in his head. And so now that Jiminy Cricket is showing up and he's like, well, do you remember what I told you about temptation? No. What the fuck did you tell him about temptation? Y'all didn't have that conversation. And he was like, well, that's him. Okay. You are explaining nothing. You are not telling him which part of this is right or wrong. You're just like, you're going to tell him that you appreciate the offer, but you got to go to school. How do I know that school is right and theater is wrong? You're not telling me these things. You're just telling me that I need to tell him this and then go this way. But you're not explaining and breaking down to me why I shouldn't be doing this, other than the fact that he is temptation. And that is not explaining what is right or wrong. Hello? He's simple. You guys have to think here. Like, you're not helping. So of course, because nothing is explained to him other than you have to do this because I'm your conscience, he's like,
Jiminy, goodbye.
Goodbye. Huh?
And not
Goodbye?
For me.
Hey, no, you can't go.
Watch you go
Very
with the
good.
dying chick.
nigga, bye. Because what are you talking about? You did not explain anything to this child. And so, of course, he goes off with Honest John and gets put into Stromboli's show, and he becomes an instant success because he is a marionette puppet without any strings. And then it turns out that Stromboli is actually a fucking villain and wants to keep him, and if he gets too old, he's going to chop him into firewood. Now, Stromboli said a whole lot of words. And when Jiminy Cricket, who is upset that Pinocchio decided to become an actor, because what would an actor need with a conscience anyway? He's like, you know what? I could at least go say bye and good luck. And he goes to try to talk to Pinocchio. Now, when he discovers that Pinocchio is in the cage, and he's like, what happened? And so again, Stromboli said a lot of words.
Sure, I will push you in the public's eye. Your face, she will be on everybody's tongue.
Pinocchio's version of the things, and this is how you can tell that he's not really thinking, because he shortened literally everything. He said,
Dad, he said he was gonna push my face in everybody's eye.
Yeah.
And just because I'm a gold brick, he's gonna chop me into firewood.
Oh, was that so?
baby, you skipped the entire conversation, because there were so many things that happened in between the part where he's going to push you into somebody's eye and chopping you into firewood. But I digress. So Geppetto is out looking for him, and this is when Geppetto's like, y'all don't eat this absolutely delicious meal that I have cooked, because apparently he's been missing for several hours. So Geppetto goes back out into the rain to look for him, and I really do feel bad for Geppetto in this moment, because when they were leaving, when Stromboli's carriage is leaving, it literally goes right past Geppetto while he's out looking for him. And when Geppetto starts like hollering out Pinocchio's name, thunder strikes at that exact same time really loud. So even with him passing by, the thunder rumbling being so loud, that thunderclap completely muted out his voice, so Pinocchio and Jiminy Cricket would not have heard him at all. So of course he is sitting in this cage with Jiminy, feeling very sorry for himself. And then as it stopped raining and you can see the stars, Miss Ma'am decides that she's going to show her face. Now, she asks what happened, and Jiminy's like, leave me out of it. No, Jiminy, we're not going to leave you out of it, because where were you? And Pinocchio is literally just lying, and discovers that lying is what makes his nose grow. Now, of course, he doesn't know that lying is wrong, because it was not discussed. He doesn't get to know that until he starts lying to her to try to cover his ass, and it's like, the lie is as plain as the nose on your face. Why didn't you give him some sort of idea of what his life is supposed to be like, going, like where he's supposed to be going? He has no clue. And I guess this is supposed to be some type of learning opportunity, like if you learn what lying does, then you won't do it. Maybe if he knew what lying is, we wouldn't be here in the first place. And maybe he would have told a couple of lies, but he would have known that what he was doing was wrong, and he would have still gotten this lesson. But he doesn't even know what a lie is. And for you to sit there and be talking to him about his lying without actually telling him what a lie is insane. So you're like, I'm only going to help you this one time. Thank you, that's very helpful. You haven't been any kind of help from the beginning of the movie till now, so that's cool. You can let me out. So she gets them out. They leave. They are supposed to be going back home, and Jiminy's like, I'll race you. They're supposed to be going back home, and they run into Honest John again, who essentially tricks him again into going to this place called Pleasure Island. And again, it's a trick that he uses. Jiminy is nowhere to be fucking found again. And Pinocchio is really good with very simple explanations. So he does this very simple explanation of Pleasure Island. So because he knows that Pinocchio obviously doesn't know anything, he gives him a playing card and is like, this is your ticket to Pleasure Island. He gets him to the coachman. They start going to Pleasure Island. Jiminy Cricket is pissed again, but it's like, stay with the boy, Mr. Conscience. Do your job. So they get to Pleasure Island. And the thing with Pleasure Island is that the boys on the island, as long as they're continuing to do the bad activities, they end up turning into jackasses or donkeys. And sometimes they can still talk, sometimes they can't. It depends on how long they have been participating in these bad activities. If they've been going into the bad activities and participating in the bad activities nonstop since they got to the island, they transform rather quickly, and they immediately lose their ability to talk. Now, Pinocchio and Lampwick did participate in these activities. However, they took a very, very long intermittent break to play pool. So there was plenty of time between the time they got to the island, the time they participated in these activities, and the time that Lampwick actually started turning into a donkey, where the curse of everything that happens on Pleasure Island was able to be like put on pause before it took effect on them. Now, Lampwick was smoking and drinking continuously and talking all kinds of shit. Smart mouth. So of course it happened faster. Pinocchio took a drag of that cigarette and of that cigar, and for whatever reason swallowed the smoke. But of course he doesn't know, so you can't really blame him. And that was probably the most that he did of the bad thing. He took a swig of whatever was in that cup, and that was it. That's why he only got the ears and the tail. He didn't get anything else because he didn't participate that long. Of course, after Lampwick turns into one and Pinocchio gets his tail and his ears, they find a way to get out. They're able to get out and they're able to go home. Now, I'm curious as to the time lapse between when he went to Pleasure Island and when he came back home, and when he was with Stromboli, because apparently it was a long ass time, because between Stromboli and the time they come back home from Pleasure Island, there are cobwebs in Geppetto's house. There's dust. They haven't been there. It looks like they haven't been there in years. And they have been swallowed by Monstro. Now, they don't know this. The Blue Fairy, who has been completely unhelpful up until this point, does something even more unhelpful. And that is, she delivers a letter, or has a letter delivered, to tell Pinocchio what has been happening since he was on Pleasure Island. And she's like, oh, your father went to go look for you on Pleasure Island. Well, how did he know that he was there? Then it was, your father got swallowed by a whale while he was out sailing to go to Pleasure Island. What? And you could not help him in any way, shape, or form. Nothing. You're not helping Pinocchio. You would be helping Geppetto. But because you can't help Pinocchio anymore, you don't help Geppetto and allow him to get swallowed by a whale. And then you send Pinocchio this letter about his father being swallowed by a whale. And he ends up going down there, going down to the ocean floor, finding this whale, getting himself swallowed, and ends up saving his dad, only to end up drowning face down in a fucking puddle, so that you could come look like the hero for bringing him, not only bringing him back to life, but turning him into a real boy. Because as a puppet, he did exactly what a real boy would do, which was sacrifice himself to save his dad. Ma'am, are you high? What the fuck kind of shit is this? Like, I'm truly curious. And then so she brings him back to life and turns him into a real boy because of his sacrifice, and everybody's united and happy. The movie is, and always has been for me, a 9 out of 10. But when you start looking at things, and this is why I like doing challenges like this, because you start to look at things critically versus for enjoyment. For enjoyment, I probably wouldn't have said too many things, but because I'm supposed to be doing a review and thinking critically about these things, I just have all of these questions. First of all, again, how long were they gone? Because it just seems like they were gone for this extended period of time, which looks to be like months. And it's like, I'm confused. And just, the Blue Fairy she pissed me off the entire movie, because I'm just like, you are useless. And all you've done at this point is manipulate situations You manipulated this boy from the beginning by planting the idea of becoming a real boy in his head and not giving him any information on what it takes to be a real boy other than being good. But you don't give him any indication of what good looks like, what bad looks like, what is the difference between right and wrong. You expected him to learn it on his own with the help of a fucking cricket who you also manipulated into being his conscience, because he didn't say anything about being his man's conscience. He was just explaining to him what a conscience is, and then here you come batting your eyelashes talking about something. Do you want to be his conscience? What? I didn't say anything like that. He, being as nice as he is and obviously falling for the batting eye thing, was just like, sure, I'll do it. But he didn't know what it meant to be a conscience other than telling him what is supposed to be between right and wrong and maybe what temptation is. But he at every turn was nowhere near Pinocchio when Pinocchio was getting into these things. Your conscience is always supposed to be with you, basically on your shoulder type thing. And he was literally never there until after Pinocchio's mind, as small as it is, had already been made up about something. And Pinocchio's obviously not listening to you now because you're not explaining anything. You're just telling him this is right, this is wrong, and this is what you need to say to these people. Well, that doesn't help me because basically what he explained to me sounds right to me, and what you're saying to me doesn't sound right to me. And she knew that. Everything that happened, she was aware of, because obviously she's watching. She's aware of the fact that Geppetto went to go look for this boy at Pleasure Island and knew that he wasn't going to find him, because she's also watching the fact that Pinocchio and Jiminy Cricket ended up escaping from there. So you allowed this man to go into open water on this rickety ass boat and get eaten by a whale. And then you tell Pinocchio about it. And then you watch him die just so that you could bring him back to life and be like, oh, your sacrifice means that you can be a real boy. No. Because had you had actually given him the tools to succeed in the beginning, to where he could still learn these lessons without actually dying, or going on a different type of adventure without putting his family at risk, he still would have been able to learn the lessons and do what real boys would be able to do, and what good boys should and should not be doing. And you still would have been able to turn him into a real boy, but you didn't do that. And you didn't do it on purpose. You see what I'm talking about? Disney be making some villains, but they want you to think that the villain's over here, and really the villain is at the beginning of the movie, just like the Enchantress from Beauty and the Beast. Villain. When we get into Beauty and the Beast, I'll talk about that one too. But anyway, as watching for just entertainment value, definitely a 9 out of 10 for me. Critically speaking, just with kind of the confusion of the time lapse, I would still put it probably about a 7.5 out of 10. I don't hate the movie. I just hate that now I have so many questions, and just looking at things from this completely different perspective that I have, and just all of the things that I watch where we are seeing villains, where villains make sense and things like that. It's kind of hard to not look at every single character in these movies, especially in Disney movies, and come to the conclusion that the villain is not always just the main villain. There's always little mini villains everywhere. But that is it for this one. Again, I did like the movie. I love this movie. I love watching this movie. It's one of my favorite Disney movies. It's also one of the ones that I have criticized the absolute most, because what in the hell? Justice for Figaro. I'm gonna say it. Justice for Figaro. I'm gonna say it every time, because he was literally just trying to live his life, and here comes this puppet. And at no point in time was his emotions not justified. Every look he had on his face, every emotion that he put out, everything that happened with Figaro, justified. Because what the hell are y'all doing with my life besides stressing me out? But anyway, thank you for stopping by Kaori's Corner. Remember, it's always suggested by you, reviewed by me,